What would you do if you discovered your father spent the night at a luxury hotel with his mistress while your mother slept alone? Trusting every lie he ever told 14-year-old Ethan Weston did the unthinkable. He screenshot the GPS history, posted it online, and captioned it with two devastating words, "My hero." Within hours, his father's career crumbled, his mother's world shattered, and a secret even darker than the affair was about to surface. But here's the hard twist nobody saw coming. If this story hooks you, drop a comment telling me what you would have done in Ethan's place. Hit subscribe so you never miss these wild stories. And now, let us begin. They say the truth will set you free, but sometimes the truth walks through your front door at 5:47 in the morning, smelling like another woman's perfume. And sometimes your 14-year-old son is the one holding the evidence. The Weston family home sat at the end of Maple Ridge Drive in Greenwich, Connecticut, where colonial houses line the street like soldiers standing at attention. Perfect lawns, perfect hedges, perfect families behind perfect doors. At least, that was what everyone believed. Ethan Weston sat alone in the dark living room, his face illuminated by the glow of his iPad. The clock on the wall ticked past 5:30, each second stretching into an eternity. His eyes were fixed on the screen, on the blue dot that had not moved in over 6 hours. The Langham Hotel, Manhattan. Room charges beginning at 11:23 the previous night. His father's phone had betrayed everything. 3 weeks ago, Ethan had been walking past the study when he heard his father whisper into his phone. The words had frozen him in place. "I cannot wait to see you tonight," Marcus had said, his voice soft in a way Ethan had never heard before. Then his father had ended the call, walked into the kitchen, and told his mother he had a client dinner that would run late. Ethan had watched his mother smile and say, "Drive safe." He had watched her believe the lie without hesitation, and something inside him had cracked. Since that night, Ethan had been tracking every late meeting, every server emergency, every excuse that pulled his father away from dinner, from baseball games, from the life they were supposed to share. The GPS history synced automatically from his father's iPhone to the family account, and Marcus had never thought to check if anyone was watching. Tonight was the 6th time Marcus had visited the Langham Hotel. The 6th time he had stayed for hours while his wife slept alone in their bed, trusting that her husband was exactly where he claimed to be. Ethan heard the garage door rumble open. His hands trembled as he gripped the iPad tighter. Part of him wanted to run upstairs, to pretend he had seen nothing, to protect the illusion that had kept their family together for 14 years. But a larger part, the part that had watched his mother's smile grow thinner over the past months, refused to stay silent any longer. Headlights swept across the front windows, then faded to darkness. A car door closed with a quiet click. Footsteps approached the side entrance. Marcus Weston stepped into the kitchen, moving with the careful precision of a man who had rehearsed his entrance. He was 42 years old, tall, with the kind of distinguished gray at his temples that made clients trust him and women notice him. His suit was wrinkled in places that suggested he had not worn it to an office. The faint scent of perfume clung to his collar, something floral and expensive, something that did not belong to his wife. Marcus reached for the light switch, already preparing his excuse. Server crash at the regional office. Emergency protocols required his presence until the system stabilized. He had rehearsed the words during the drive home, polishing them until they sounded almost believable. The light clicked on. Marcus froze. Ethan sat at the dining table, still in his clothes from the day before. His eyes were red from exhaustion and something else, something that looked like grief. "Buddy," Marcus said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "What are you doing up so early?" Ethan did not answer. Instead, he slowly turned the iPad around, holding it up so his father could see the screen clearly. The map filled the display. A blue line traced the route from their house to Manhattan. A red circle highlighted the Langham Hotel, timestamps marking every minute Marcus had spent there. 6 hours, 12 minutes, 43 seconds. Marcus's rehearsed smile collapsed. The color drained from his face as he stared at the evidence his own phone had created. "That is not what it looks like," he stammered, stepping forward with his hands raised. "Ethan, let me explain." "Do not," Ethan said quietly. The single word carried more weight than any shout could have delivered. He stood slowly, tucking the iPad under his arm. For a moment, father and son stared at each other across the kitchen, 14 years of trust crumbling in the silence between them. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, to spin another lie, to twist the narrative the way he always did. But Ethan was already walking past him, his shoulder brushing deliberately against his father's arm as he headed for the stairs. Marcus heard the soft chime of a notification, then another. Yeah. Then three more in rapid succession. His blood ran cold. He grabbed his phone from his pocket and opened Instagram with shaking fingers. Ethan's post was already there. The GPS screenshot displayed for everyone to see. The caption burned into his vision. My hero, 6 hours at the Langham while mom thought he was fixing servers. Happy anniversary week. Dad, their 15th wedding anniversary was in 3 days. Marcus scrolled frantically through the comments that were already appearing. Neighbors, co-workers, parents from Ethan's school. The Greenwich Community Parents Group had been tagged, and the post was spreading like wildfire through the network of families who had smiled at Marcus at every barbecue and charity event for the past decade. His phone buzzed again, a text from his assistant, then one from his boss, then one from a number he did not recognize. Upstairs, Carrie Weston was about to wake up to 47 notifications and the end of the life she thought she knew. Marcus stood alone in the kitchen, the harsh morning light exposing every line on his face, every shadow of guilt he had hidden for months. The perfect house suddenly felt like a prison. The perfect life he had constructed was collapsing around him. And somewhere above him, his son closed his bedroom door, finally releasing the burden he had carried for 3 weeks. The truth was out. There was no taking it back. Carrie Weston had always been a light sleeper, but exhaustion had pulled her under sometime after midnight. She had waited for Marcus until 11, watching the clock tick past each hour while telling herself that server emergencies happened. Important men sometimes had important responsibilities. Her husband of 15 years would never lie to her about something so simple. She woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and her phone vibrating against the nightstand with an urgency that felt wrong. The bedroom was too quiet, the space beside her in the bed cold and empty. Her hand reached for the phone automatically, eyes still blurry with sleep. The screen showed 47 notifications, texts, Instagram alerts, Facebook messages, all cascading over each other in a flood of urgent red numbers that made her stomach tighten with dread. The first text was from Diana Holloway, her best friend since their freshman year at Yale. The words made no sense at first. Carrie, call me now. Carrie sat up slowly, her heart beginning to race without understanding why. She scrolled past Diana's message to find others, each one more alarming than the last. Oh my God, Carrie, I am so sorry. Is this real? Please tell me Ethan got hacked. We are here for you, whatever you need. Thinking of you during this difficult time. Her thumb found Instagram with trembling precision. Ethan's profile loaded, and there it was. The GPS screenshot filled the screen, the hotel name glowing accusingly in the center of the map. The timestamp, the red circle highlighting 6 hours of betrayal, the caption that read like a eulogy for their marriage. My hero, 6 hours at the Langham while mom thought he was fixing servers. Happy anniversary week. Dad. Carrie's hands began to shake so violently that the phone slipped from her grip, bouncing twice on the mattress before settling face up, the evidence still glaring at her from the cracked screen. She could not breathe. The room tilted sideways, the familiar walls of her bedroom suddenly foreign and hostile. The wedding photos on the dresser seemed to mock her. The dried flowers from their 10th anniversary, pressed and framed above the doorway, became symbols of a lie she had been living without knowing. 15 years. 15 years of building a life together, of sacrificing her career in marketing to raise their son, of believing every word that came out of her husband's mouth. 15 years of trusting that the man sleeping beside her was exactly who he claimed to be. 6 hours at the Langham Hotel. While she slept alone, Carrie forced herself to stand, her legs unsteady beneath her. She pulled on a robe with numb fingers and walked downstairs on autopilot, her mind still refusing to process what her eyes had seen. The stairs felt longer than usual, each step carrying her closer to a confrontation she had never imagined having. Marcus was in the kitchen, pacing like a caged animal. His suit from the night before was wrinkled, his hair disheveled in a way that looked nothing like a man who had spent 6 hours fixing servers. His phone was pressed to his ear, his voice low and urgent. I will handle it, he was saying. Just give me time to manage the situation. When he saw Carrie in the doorway, he ended the call immediately. Something flickered across his face, a mixture of guilt and calculation that disappeared before she could fully register it. "Carrie," he said, moving toward her with his hands outstretched. "Before you say anything, you need to understand that Ethan is out of control. He has destroyed this family with one reckless post." She stared at him, waiting for the denial, waiting for him to tell her it was all a misunderstanding, that the GPS was wrong, that there was an explanation that would make everything okay, waiting for the words that would let her pretend the last 10 minutes had not happened. Instead, he kept talking about damage control. "Do you see what your son did?" Marcus continued, his voice rising with each word. "He has humiliated us in front of everyone we know, the school parents, my coworkers, our neighbors. Everyone is talking about this. My phone has not stopped buzzing since 5 this morning." Carrie felt something cold settle in her chest. "Where were you last night, Marcus?" The question stopped him mid-sentence. His jaw tightened visibly. "I told you. Work emergency. The servers at the regional office went down and I had to stay until the IT team got everything stabilized. You know how these things happen." Carrie shook her head slowly. "The Langham Hotel is not your office." Marcus changed tactics immediately, his expression softening into something resembling remorse. Tears actually gathered in his eyes, though Carrie could not tell if they were genuine or rehearsed. He had always been good at crying on command when negotiations required it. "Okay," he said, his voice cracking with practiced precision. "It was one mistake, one terrible mistake. She meant nothing to me. Carrie, I got caught up in something stupid, and I know I do not deserve your forgiveness. But please think about our family. Think about Ethan. Think about everything we have built together. One mistake." The words echoed in Carrie's mind as she walked past him to her laptop on the kitchen counter. Her marketing brain kicked in automatically, shifting from wounded wife to investigator. Her fingers moved with purpose, pulling up their joint credit card statements, the ones she had stopped checking months ago because she trusted her husband to handle their finances. "If it was one mistake," she said slowly, scrolling through the charges. "Why are there transactions at the Langham on September 3rd? Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but she kept scrolling. And September 17th, and October 1st, and October 15th, and November 2nd. She looked up at him, watching the color drain from his face like water from a broken vase. "I have been suspicious for months, Marcus. The late nights, the guarded phone calls, the way you started showering the moment you walked through the door. I just did not want to believe it. I convinced myself that I was being paranoid, that 15 years of marriage meant something." Before he could respond, a sound from the stairs made them both turn. Ethan stood at the top, his face streaked with tears, his shoulders shaking with the weight of everything he had witnessed. "I tried to tell you, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "Twice I started to say something, and I could not find the words. I did not know how to make you believe me when you trusted him so completely." Carrie felt her heart shatter into pieces she was not sure could ever be reassembled. Her son had been carrying this weight alone for weeks. Her 14-year-old boy had known the truth while she remained willfully blind. She climbed the stairs and pulled Ethan into her arms, holding him tight while he sobbed against her shoulder. His tears soaked through her robe, warm and desperate. "I am sorry, Bukos. I saw her," he whispered. "I am sorry I posted it. I did not know what else to do." "Well, you told the truth," Carrie said, though her own voice was trembling. "That is never wrong." But the GPS post was just the first domino. What Carrie did not know was that Amber Sinclair, the woman from the Langham Hotel, was already drafting her own statement. And this one would make the affair look like the least of Marcus's sins. Amber Sinclair woke to the sound of her phone exploding with notifications. Her Brooklyn apartment, a sleek one-bedroom overlooking a busy street lined with coffee shops and yoga studios, was bathed in the gray light of early morning. She reached for the device, expecting work emails or perhaps a text from Marcus explaining why he had left so abruptly at 5 in the morning. What she found instead made her sit straight up in bed. The GPS post, the screenshot showing exactly where Marcus had spent the night, the caption dripping with teenage betrayal. And underneath it, hundreds of comments from people she did not know, calling Marcus every name she had ever heard and several she had not. Amber was 29 years old, a marketing coordinator at the pharmaceutical company where Marcus served as vice president of sales. She had auburn hair that she highlighted every 6 weeks, green eyes that photographed well, and an ambition that had driven her since she graduated from a state school with $60,000 in debt. When Marcus first approached her at the company holiday party 2 years ago, she had known exactly what he was offering. She had also known exactly what she wanted in return. She was not a naive young woman seduced by a powerful older man. She had made calculated decisions at every step, accepting his attention because it came with dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend trips to boutique hotels, and promises that felt increasingly tangible with each passing month. "I am going to leave her," Marcus had told her a dozen times. "Once I get this promotion locked down, I will have the financial stability to make a clean break. Carrie will be fine. She has the house. She has her friends. And then it will be just us." Amber had believed him. Or rather, she had chosen to believe him because it served her purposes. Now, staring at the wreckage of those promises on her phone screen, she saw her situation with brutal clarity. Marcus was not going to leave his wife. He was not going to secure her future. He was going to do what powerful men always did when scandals broke: throw everyone else under the bus to save himself, unless she struck first. Amber climbed out of bed and made herself a cup of coffee, her mind already calculating her next move. She had screenshots of every text Marcus had ever sent her, every promise, every complaint about his wife, every cruel comment about the woman who waited at home while he spent nights in hotel rooms. She had evidence that Marcus had been expensing their dinners to the company, categorizing them as client entertainment. She had records of the bonus he had arranged for her after she agreed to a weekend in the Hamptons. She had leverage that could either destroy her or save her, depending on how she played it. By 9 o'clock, Amber had made her decision. She opened LinkedIn, the professional network where her reputation mattered most, and began to type. "I am devastated to learn that Marcus Weston has been lying to multiple people, including me. I entered into a relationship with him after he repeatedly assured me that his marriage was over in all but paperwork. I believed his promises. I trusted his word. I am not proud of my choices, but I refuse to be the only one held accountable for a married man's decisions." She attached screenshots, carefully selected, strategically redacted, but damning nonetheless. "Carrie and I are basically roommates at this point. I stay for the kid, not for her. You are the only one who really sees me for who I am." She let herself go after Ethan was born. "I deserve someone who actually tries." Amber read through the post 3 times, checking for typos and legal vulnerabilities. Then she pressed publish and watched the comments begin to roll in. Across the river in Greenwich, Carrie Weston was still sitting on the bathroom floor with Ethan, trying to process the magnitude of her husband's betrayal, when her phone buzzed with a new notification. Diana Holloway's text was brief. "There is more. Do not look until I get there." But Carrie had never been good at waiting. She opened LinkedIn with trembling fingers and found Amber Sinclair's post already at the top of her feed. The screenshots hit her like physical blows. Each text message was a knife sliding between her ribs. She let herself go. "I deserve someone who actually tries." Basically roommates. Carrie stared at the words until they blurred, until they became just shapes on a screen that meant nothing. But she knew what they meant. She knew that her husband had not just betrayed her with his body, he had betrayed her with his words, reducing 15 years of partnership to a joke shared with another woman. "Mom," Ethan's voice came from outside the bathroom door. "Mom, are you okay?" Carrie could not answer. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold tile floor, her phone clutched in her hands, her breath coming in shallow gasps that did not provide enough oxygen. She had given up her career for this family. She had spent 10 years supporting Marcus's ambitions, managing the household, raising their son, handling every domestic responsibility so he could focus on climbing the corporate ladder. And in return, he had told another woman that she did not try. The tears came without warning, hot and relentless, soaking into the collar of her robe. This was rock bottom. This was the lowest point she could imagine. Her husband had not just cheated. He had erased her. He had rewritten their marriage as a prison he was trying to escape, and she had been too blind to see it. "Mom, please open the door." Ethan's voice was panicked now. "Please, I need to know you are okay. Carrie forced herself to stand, forced herself to unlock the door, forced herself to pull her son into her arm even though she felt like she was falling apart at the seams. We are going to be okay, she whispered into his hair. I promise. But she did not believe it. Not yet. By noon, both posts had over 4,000 shares. By the 2 in the afternoon, Marcus's company had requested that he take a leave of absence pending an internal investigation. And by 5 o'clock, Carrie would discover that the affair was not even the worst secret her husband was hiding. Diana Holloway did not knock when she arrived at the Weston house. She used the spare key that Carrie had given her 8 years ago, the one that hung on a small hook in her kitchen for exactly this kind of emergency. Some friendships were forged in dormitory rooms and sorority houses, tested by time and distance, strengthened by the kind of loyalty that most people only read about in novels. Diana and Carrie had been that kind of friend since freshman year at Yale. She found Carrie sitting at the dining table, still in her robe, staring at her laptop screen with the vacant expression of someone who had absorbed too many shocks to process anymore. Ethan sat beside her and, his hand on her arm, looking far older than 14 should ever look. The house was too quiet, the air heavy with the aftermath of destroyed trust. Diana was 40 years old, a divorce attorney at one of Manhattan's most prestigious family law firms. She wore a charcoal blazer over designer jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail that meant business. She had handled hundreds of divorces over her 15-year career, from amicable separations between reasonable adults to scorched earth warfare that left nothing but ashes. She recognized the look on Carrie's face immediately. Shock, grief, the paralysis that came from having your entire reality rewritten in a single morning. Get up, Diana said firmly, setting her briefcase on the table. Shower. Put on something that makes you feel powerful. We have work to do. Carrie looked at her blankly. Did you see what he wrote about me? He told her I let myself go. He told her I do not try. I saw everything. Diana pulled out a chair and sat down, her voice steady and controlled. And I promise you, by the time we are finished, Marcus Weston will regret every single word he ever typed. But first, I need you present. Can you do that for me? Something in Diana's tone cut through the fog in Carrie's mind. This was not sympathy. This was not the kind of gentle comfort she had been drowning in all morning and from neighbors and distant relatives who had seen the posts. This was strategy. And strategy, she realized, was exactly what she needed. Ethan, Diana said, turning to the boy with a gentle but firm expression, can you make your mom some coffee? The strongest you know how to make. We are going to need fuel. Ethan nodded, grateful for something concrete to do, and disappeared into the kitchen. 20 minutes later, Carrie came downstairs in dark jeans and a fitted black sweater, her wet hair combed back from her face, her eyes still red but focused. The woman who descended those stairs was not the same person who had climbed them an hour ago. Something had shifted, hardened, prepared itself for battle. Diana had transformed the dining table into a command center. Her laptop was open, legal documents spread across the polished wood surface like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be assembled. A bottle of wine sat unopened beside 2 glasses, reserved for later when the work was done. Sit, Diana said, pointing to the chair across from her. Let me tell you what I have already found. She pulled up a spreadsheet on her screen, numbers and dates arranged in damning columns that told a story of deception far deeper than a simple affair. Marcus's salary at the pharmaceutical company is $380,000 per year, plus performance bonuses that average another $75,000. You have been married for 15 years, which in Connecticut means you are entitled to equitable distribution of all marital assets accumulated during the marriage. Carrie nodded slowly, forcing her marketing brain to engage with the data. Your house is valued at approximately $1.2 million. You have retirement accounts totaling about $400,000 between his 401k and your IRA. Investment portfolio is worth another $200,000. And a joint savings account with roughly $50,000 in liquid assets. Diana paused, her expression sharpening like a blade being drawn from its sheath. But here is where it gets interesting. I ran a preliminary search through some databases I have access to through the firm, and I found something Marcus clearly did not want anyone to discover. She turned the laptop so Carrie could see the screen clearly. A bank statement from an institution Carrie had never heard of, with an account number that was completely unfamiliar. There is a separate account in Marcus's name only, opened at a small credit union in Stamford. It currently holds $127,000 accumulated over the past 3 years through transfers that were clearly designed to fly under the radar. 500 here, 1,000 there, occasionally larger sums when bonus checks arrived. Never enough to trigger any automatic flags or require your signature. Carrie stared at the numbers, her mind struggling to process their implications. He has been hiding money from me. He has been hiding marital assets, Diana corrected, which constitutes fraud under Connecticut law. This is not just grounds for divorce. Carrie, this is leverage. This is ammunition. This is proof that he has been planning an exit strategy while smiling at you across the breakfast table. For the first time since she had woken up to those 47 notifications, Carrie felt something other than despair. It started as a small flame in her chest, barely perceptible, but it was warm and it was growing and it felt nothing like grief. It felt like anger. "What do I do?" she asked. Diana smiled, the kind of smile that made opposing counsel nervous in courtrooms across Manhattan, the kind of smile that had earned her the nickname the Shark among her colleagues. "First, we document everything, every lie, every hidden asset, every text message that proves premeditation and malicious intent. Then we file for divorce on our terms, before he has a chance to hide anything else or move money offshore. And then we make absolutely certain that everyone who needs to know about Marcus Weston's true character has access to the truth." Ethan appeared in the doorway, holding a steaming mug of coffee. He had been listening from the kitchen, his young face showing a mixture of hope and fear that broke Carrie's heart. "Does this mean we are going to be okay, Mom?" Carrie looked at Diana, who nodded with quiet confidence that came from years of winning battles for women in exactly this situation. "It means we are going to fight," Carrie said, "and we are going to win." For the rest of the afternoon, they worked with methodical precision. Diana took notes while Carrie recounted every suspicious moment from the past year, every excuse that had not quite added up. Every time Marcus had guarded his phone or stayed late at work or come home smelling like soap from a shower, he had taken somewhere other than his office gym. By evening, they had built the foundation of a case that would strip Marcus of everything he thought he controlled. "He is done, Carrie," Diana said as she packed up her briefcase, the wine bottle now empty between them. "This is an open and shut case. You have evidence of infidelity, hidden assets, and emotional abuse documented through his own text messages. No judge in Connecticut will side with him after seeing this evidence." Carrie allowed herself to hope. For the first time since dawn, the future seemed like something she might actually survive, might even eventually thrive in. But Marcus Weston did not become vice president of sales by losing battles. And tonight, he was about to deploy the one weapon Carrie never expected: his mother. The sun had just set when the Mercedes pulled into the Weston driveway. Carrie recognized the car immediately. The silver sedan that Patricia Weston drove with the same imperious precision she applied to everything else in her life. Her mother-in-law had arrived without calling, without warning, without any of the courtesy that normal social interactions required. Patricia Weston was 68 years old, immaculately dressed in a cream cashmere sweater and tailored slacks that probably cost more than Carrie's entire wardrobe. Her silver hair was styled in the kind of elegant waves that required weekly salon appointments. Her pearls were real, her handbag was designer, and her expression as she climbed out of the car suggested that she had already decided exactly how this conversation was going to end. Carrie had never been good enough for Patricia. From the moment Marcus had brought her home to meet his family, Patricia had made her disapproval clear through 1,000 small cuts. Comments about Carrie's state school education when the Westons were Yale legacies, questions about her family's modest background in comparison to the Weston dynasty, subtle implications that Marcus was settling, that he could have done better, that a woman who worked in marketing would never truly understand the responsibilities of being a Weston wife. For 15 years, Carrie had smiled through the insults. She had bitten her tongue at holiday dinners. She had pretended not to notice when Patricia gave her gifts that were always slightly wrong, slightly insulting, chosen to remind her of her place. Those days were over. "Patricia," Carrie said, meeting her mother-in-law at the front door, "I did not expect you." Clearly. Patricia's eyes swept over Carrie's casual clothes, her still damp hair, the evidence of a day spent in crisis mode rather than maintaining appearances. "May I come in?" Carrie considered, saying no. For one satisfying moment, she imagined closing the door in Patricia's face and returning to the command center Diana had established. But curiosity won out. She wanted to know what Marcus had told his mother, how he had spun this disaster to make himself the victim. They sat in the living room, Carrie on the couch where she had spent so many evenings pretending her marriage was fine, Patricia in the armchair that Marcus always claimed during family gatherings. The older woman crossed her ankles with practiced elegance and fixed Carrie with a stare that had intimidated corporate boards and charity committees for decades. "I have spoken with Marcus," Patricia began. "I know what happened." "Then you know he cheated on me for at least 6 months," Carrie said flatly, "with a woman from his office, while I was home taking care of his son and managing his household." Patricia waved a dismissive hand. "I know my son made a mistake. Men do sometimes, especially when they are under pressure. The demands of his position, the stress of providing for a family, the expectations that come with carrying the Weston name. These things take a toll." Carrie felt her jaw tighten. "Are you suggesting that his affair is somehow justified?" "I am suggesting," Patricia said, leaning forward slightly, "that you drove him to it." The words hung in the air like poison. "You let yourself become boring. Carrie, you stopped trying. You gave up your career, which I never understood in the first place. And you turned into exactly the kind of domestic nothing that successful men eventually grow tired of. What did you expect would happen?" For a moment, Carrie could not breathe. The accusation was so cruel, so calculated, that it felt like a physical blow. "I gave up my career to raise your grandson," she said quietly. "I gave up my career because Marcus asked me to. He said he needed me to manage the house, to be available for Ethan, to support his ambitions. I sacrificed everything for this family." Patricia's smile was cold. "And look where it got you." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a manila folder, placing it on the coffee table between them. "This is why I came tonight. Not to comfort you, not to take sides, but to make sure you understand exactly what you are dealing with if you try to destroy my son." Carrie opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside were documents she did not fully understand. Legal papers covered in dense text and official stamps. "The house," Patricia explained, "is technically titled in a family trust that was established before your marriage. You may have lived here for 15 years, but you have no legal claim to the property itself. My lawyers assure me that in a divorce, it would revert to the trust rather than being divided as a marital asset." Carrie felt the floor shift beneath her feet. "Additionally," Patricia continued, "my brother-in-law serves as a superior court judge in Hartford. While he would obviously recuse himself from your specific case, his colleagues tend to be sympathetic to families they know socially. The legal community in Connecticut is smaller than you might imagine." "That sounds like a threat. It sounds like reality." Patricia stood, smoothing the creases from her slacks. "And speaking of reality, I should mention that I am aware of certain details from your past. A DUI arrest in your 20s, before you met Marcus. Some questionable decisions during your college years. Nothing major on its own, but the kind of information that could be very damaging if it were to become public during a custody dispute." Carrie felt ice spreading through her veins. "You would weaponize my past to take my son away from me." Patricia paused at the doorway, looking back with an expression that held no warmth, no maternal concern, nothing but cold strategic calculation. "I would do whatever is necessary to protect my family's reputation. I suggest you think very carefully about whether this battle is worth fighting. Carrie, some wars cannot be won, no matter how righteous the cause." She left without saying goodbye. The front door clicked shut with a finality that echoed through the empty house. Carrie sat alone in the living room, staring at the folder of documents that threatened everything Diana had promised. The house might not be theirs to divide. The judges might be biased. Her past could be turned into a weapon. Everything that had felt certain an hour ago now felt fragile, unstable, built on foundations that could crumble at any moment. When Diana called 10 minutes later, Carrie could barely form words. "She is bluffing," Diana said firmly. "Half of what she told you is probably not even legally enforceable. Trust structures can be challenged. Judicial bias can be documented and addressed. And ancient DUI arrests are not grounds for removing a custody from a fit parent." "But what if she is not bluffing?" Carrie whispered. "What if I lose Ethan?" The doubt had been planted, and doubt, Carrie was learning, was a poison that worked slowly but thoroughly. That night, she went to bed believing the worst was behind her. She was wrong. The call from Ethan's school would come at 8:47 the next morning, and nothing would ever be the same. Carrie was making breakfast when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Greenwich Academy, and something in her chest tightened before she even answered. "Mrs. Weston," the voice belonged to the school secretary, calm but urgent. "There has been an incident involving Ethan. We need you to come to the principal's office as soon as possible." Carrie's spatula clattered against the stove. "What kind of incident? Is he hurt?" "He is being treated by the school nurse. The principal will explain everything when you arrive." The drive to Greenwich Academy took 12 minutes, but it felt like hours. Carrie's mind spiraled through every terrible possibility, from accidents to fights to something far worse. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She found Ethan in the principal's office, sitting in a plastic chair with an ice pack pressed against his left eye. His lip was split, dried blood crusted at the corner of his mouth. His clothes were torn and dirty, as if he had been rolling on concrete. "Ethan," Carrie rushed to his side, dropping to her knees. "What happened? Who did this to you?" "Tyler Brennan," Ethan said quietly. "Senior. He and his friends caught me in the parking lot before first period." Principal Morrison, a stern woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and glasses perched on her nose, stepped forward. "Mrs. Weston, I am deeply sorry about this incident. From what we have gathered, Tyler initiated the confrontation. He made some comments about your family situation, and when Ethan tried to walk away, Tyler physically blocked his path." "What kind of comments?" Ethan looked down at his hands. "He said my dad is a cheater and I am a snitch. He said the whole school knows my family is trash now. He said," his voice cracked, "he said I ruined my own father to get attention." Carrie felt something inside her snap, not break, but transform. Her grief crystallized into rage. "And where is Tyler Brennan now?" "Being treated in a separate room," Principal Morrison said. Ethan fought back. "Both boys are being suspended for 3 days pending a disciplinary review." "Well, my son defended himself after being physically attacked, and he is being punished equally with his attacker." The principal's expression remained neutral, practiced in the art of diplomatic non-answers. "School policy requires equal consequences for physical altercations, regardless of who initiated the conflict. I understand this is frustrating, but our hands are tied." Carrie wanted to scream. She wanted to find Tyler Brennan and his parents and make them understand exactly what their son had done. But one look at Ethan's battered face told her that her priorities needed to be elsewhere. In the car, Ethan finally broke down completely. "Everyone has seen the posts, Mom." The words came in gasping bursts between sobs. "They screenshot Amber's texts and passed them around in group chats. They say Dad called you fat and boring. They say you are pathetic for not knowing." Each word was a knife. "I am so sorry, Madam," he continued. "I should not have posted it. I thought I was doing the right thing. But all I did was give them ammunition. I ruined everything." Carrie pulled the car over to the side of the road, put it in park, and turned to face her son. "Listen to me very carefully," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her own face. "You did not ruin anything. Your father ruined things when he made the choices he made. You told the truth, and the truth is never, ever wrong. Do you understand me?" Ethan nodded, but she could see that he did not believe her. The damage had already been done. When they arrived home, Marcus's car was in the driveway. Carrie's stomach dropped. She had not expected him to be there, had not prepared for another confrontation on top of everything else that had already happened. She told Ethan to go inside through the back door and wait in his room. Then she walked around to the front of the house, where Marcus stood on the porch with his arms crossed and his jaw set in the rigid line that meant he was spoiling for a fight. "I heard what happened at school," he said. "I have been trying to call you all morning. I was busy dealing with the consequences of your affair." Marcus ignored the comment. "Where is Ethan? I want to see him." "He does not want to see you right now." "He is my son. I have a right to see him." Carrie stepped closer, forcing Marcus to look directly into her eyes. "Your son was beaten up this morning by a senior who called him a snitch and said his family is trash. Your son has been crying for an hour because screenshots of your texts with your mistress are circulating through his school. Your son thinks he ruined everything by telling the truth about what you did. Marcus's expression flickered. For a moment, something that might have been guilt crossed his features. I need to talk to him. I need to explain. Explain what? That you spent 6 months telling another woman his mother was boring and pathetic, that you were planning to leave us as soon as your next promotion came through. What exactly are you going to explain? Before Carrie could state him, Marcus pushed past her and stormed into the house. She ran after him, catching up as he climbed the stairs toward Ethan's room. Ethan, Marcus shouted, pounding on the closed door. Open this door right now. We need to talk. The door opened slowly. Ethan stood there with his black eye and split lip, looking at his father with an expression that held no warmth, no hope, nothing but exhaustion. What do you want? Dad, Marcus's face contorted. This is what happens when you air family business online. Do you understand what you have done? You have humiliated yourself, humiliated this family, destroyed my career. Are you happy now? Ethan's voice was quiet. I humiliated you. That is what you mean. Do not twist my words. I am not twisting anything. I am finally seeing you clearly. Something snapped in Marcus. He reached out and grabbed Ethan's arm, his fingers digging into the flesh hard enough to leave bruises. You will not speak to me that way. Carrie moved faster than she had ever moved in her life. She stepped between them, forcing Marcus to release his grip, placing her body as a barrier between her husband and her son. Do not you ever touch him like that again, she said, and her voice was a sound she did not recognize, low and dangerous and absolutely certain. If you put your hands on him one more time, I will call the police and file charges. Do you understand me? Marcus stared at her as if seeing a stranger. This was not the soft wife he had manipulated for 15 years. This was not the woman who had quietly accepted his lies and excuses and empty promises. This was a mother protecting her child. Get out of this house, Carrie continued. Now, Marcus left without another word, but the damage had been done. That night, Carrie checked on Ethan every hour. At 2 in the morning, she found his door locked and music playing loudly from inside. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again, panic rising in her chest. When she finally got the door open, she found him sitting on the floor beside his bed, holding a baseball bat and crying silently. I thought about just disappearing, he whispered, going somewhere no one knows me, starting over as someone else. Carrie sank to the floor beside him and pulled him into her arms. I am right here, she said, holding him as tightly as she could. I am not going anywhere, and neither are you. They stayed like that until the sun came up. The next morning, Carrie made a decision. She was done being defensive. It was time to go on the attack. Starting with Amber Sinclair, Carrie Weston had not dressed to impress anyone in years. She had not needed to. Her life had shrunk to the dimensions of school runs and grocery shopping and waiting for a husband who was never quite present even when he was home. But today was different. She chose dark jeans that still fit perfectly, a sharp blazer in charcoal gray, and heels that added 3 inches to her height. She applied makeup with precision, covering the evidence of sleepless nights and endless tears. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a version of herself she had almost forgotten existed. The marketing executive, the woman who had once commanded conference rooms and negotiated million-dollar campaigns, the woman who had been buried under 15 years of domestic sacrifice. Are you sure about this? Diana asked, watching Carrie gather her keys and phone. Confronting the mistress directly is almost never a good idea. It can be used against you in court. I am not going to threaten her, Carrie said. I am going to offer her something better than Marcus ever could. What the truth. The train to Brooklyn took 45 minutes. Carrie used the time to review everything she knew about Amber Sinclair. Information Diana had compiled from social media profiles and public records. 29 years old. Marketing coordinator. State school graduate with significant student debt. An Instagram feed full of carefully curated photos that projected success and sophistication but hinted at the insecurity underneath. Amber's apartment building was a converted warehouse in a trendy neighborhood, the kind of place young professionals moved to when they wanted to feel like they had made it in the city. Carrie waited outside, watching the entrance, until she spotted auburn hair and green eyes emerging through the glass doors. Amber froze when she saw her. We need to talk, Carrie said calmly. I do not think that is a good idea. Amber's voice was defensive, but her eyes flickered with something that looked like guilt. You posted about my husband on LinkedIn. You shared screenshots of his texts for the entire professional world to see. You owe me 10 minutes. They sat in a coffee shop around the corner, a pretentious place with exposed brick and overpriced lattes. The morning crowd had thinned out, leaving them alone at a corner table where their conversation could not be overheard. Carrie studied the woman across from her. Amber was beautiful. Yes, but not in the devastating way she had imagined during sleepless nights. She was young and ambitious and clearly terrified of where this conversation might lead. I am not here to fight over Marcus, Carrie said. If you want him, you can have him. I am finished pretending my marriage is something it stopped being years ago. Amber blinked, clearly surprised. Then why are you here? Because I want to know one thing. Did he promise you he was leaving me? A long pause, Amber's perfectly manicured nails tapped against her coffee cup. Yes, she finally admitted, many times. He said you were basically separated, that you were staying together for Ethan until the timing was right. He said once his promotion came through, he would have the financial security to make a clean break. And you believed him. He was very convincing. Carrie leaned forward, her voice dropping. He is a liar, Amber. He lied to me for 15 years. He is lying to you now, and he will keep lying to whoever comes next because that is who he is. I know that now. Amber's composure cracked slightly. After everything that happened, after seeing how he reacted, I know I was just another tool for his ego. But you do not know everything. Carrie reached into her purse and pulled out a printed photograph. Her name was Jessica, administrative assistant in his department. This was in 3 years before you. Amber stared at the photo, her face paling. He told her the same things he told you, that his marriage was over, that they would be together soon, that she was the only one who really understood him. She believed him for 8 months before she realized the truth. She filed an HR complaint, which was buried because Marcus is very good at protecting himself. Then she transferred to the California office to get away from him. Carrie slid the photo across the table. You are not special to him, Amber. You are a pattern, and when he gets bored or when the risk gets too high, he will move on to someone else and tell her the same pretty lies. Amber's eyes glistened with tears she was clearly fighting to control. I thought I knew what I was doing, she whispered. I thought I was being strategic, using him the same way he was using me, but I was just as stupid as everyone else. I am not asking you to help me, Carrie said, standing to leave. But you should know that whatever he promised you, he is not going to deliver. And when he moves on to the next one, you will be exactly where I am now, alone, humiliated, starting over. She placed her business card on the table. If you decide you want to tell the truth, the whole truth, call me. Carrie walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. She had done what she came to do. The rest was up to Amber. That evening, while Carrie was heating soup for dinner, her phone rang. An unknown number. Mrs. Weston, this is Amber Sinclair. I have been thinking about what you said. Carrie put down the ladle. And I have more than screenshots. I have expense reports, Marcus falsified, claiming our dinners were client entertainment. I have records of a bonus he arranged for me that was actually embezzled from company funds. I have everything. For the first time in days, Carrie smiled. Send it all. Everything you have. Are you going to destroy him? I am going to make sure he faces the consequences of his choices. What happens after that is up to him. She ended the call and immediately dialed Diana. We have everything we need, Carrie said. Boss said. He is finished. But Marcus had one more card to play, and this one would put Ethan directly in danger. The custody papers arrived by courier at 8 in the morning, 2 days after Carrie's meeting with Amber. She signed for the envelope without thinking, assuming it was more documentation from Diana's office. When she read the contents, her blood turned to ice. Emergency motion for temporary custody. Filed by Marcus Weston. The document painted a picture of Carrie that she barely recognized. Unstable, emotionally volatile, engaging in parental alienation by encouraging Ethan to spy on his father, exposing their minor child to inappropriate adult matters, and using him as a weapon in marital disputes. Marcus was asking the court to grant him temporary sole custody of Ethan, pending psychological evaluation of both parents. Carrie called Diana immediately. "This is a Hail Mary," Diana said, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. "He is desperate and throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. But the judge he requested, Judge Richard Blackwell, is not that one of Patricia's contacts." A long pause. "Yes, he is. But he should recuse himself given the family connection. If he does not, we can file a motion challenging his impartiality." Should recuse himself is not the same as will recuse himself. Carrie, I need you to stay calm. We have overwhelming evidence in our favor. No judge, no matter how connected to the Weston family, can ignore what we have documented. Carrie wanted to believe her, but the fear had already taken root. She sat Ethan down that afternoon and explained as gently as she could what his father was trying to do. The color drained from his face as he listened. "He wants to take me away from you. He is trying to scare us into backing down. It is not going to work." "But what if it does?" Ethan's voice cracked. "What if the judge is on his side? What if I have to go live with him and Grandma Patricia?" "That is not going to happen. You do not know that. You cannot promise that." He was right. She could not. That night, Carrie went to bed with a headache that felt like a vice around her skull. The stress of the past week had accumulated into a physical weight that made every movement exhausting. She took 2 aspirin, set her alarm for 7, and fell into a restless sleep filled with dreams of courtrooms and judges and Ethan being led away by people in suits. She woke at 3 in the morning to silence. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that felt wrong, that pressed against her eardrums with an absence that demanded attention. She walked to Ethan's room and knocked softly. No answer. She pushed the door open. The bed was empty. The window was closed. His backpack was gone, and so were his sneakers. On the pillow was a note, written in handwriting that shook so badly it was barely legible. "Mom, I am sorry. I cannot be the reason you lose everything. If I am not here, Dad cannot use me against you. I am making it easier for everyone. Please do not hate me. I love you." Carrie screamed. The next hours blurred together in a nightmare of phone calls and flashing lights. Diana arrived within 30 minutes. The police came 20 minutes after that. Detective Morrison took the report, his face professionally neutral, but his eyes showing genuine concern. "He is 14 with access to a vehicle," the detective explained. "The family's second car is missing. We have issued an alert to all units in the area and neighboring jurisdictions. Do you have any idea where he might go?" Carrie tried to think through the panic fogging her brain. The baseball field, the park where we used to have picnics, the beach where we scattered his grandfather's ashes. "We will check all of those locations. In the meantime, I need you to stay here in case he tries to contact you." Waiting was torture. Every minute stretched into eternity. Carrie paced the living room, clutching her phone, willing it to ring with good news. Diana sat at the dining table, silent for once, her legal expertise useless against the terror of a missing child. At 3:47 in the morning, Carrie's phone finally buzzed. "Mrs. Weston, this is Detective Morrison. We found him. Hudson River Overlook, about 30 miles north. He is shaken up but physically unharmed." Carrie collapsed against the wall, sobbing with relief. She drove to the location faster than the speed limit allowed, barely seeing the road through her tears. When she arrived, patrol cars illuminated the small parking area overlooking the water. The family's sedan was parked at the edge, its headlights pointing toward the dark river below. Ethan sat on a bench, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. Carrie ran to him. She fell to her knees on the cold concrete and pulled him into her arms with a desperation that bordered on violence. "Do not you ever do that again," she sobbed. "Do not you ever do that again." "I was not going to hurt myself," Ethan whispered. "I just wanted to disappear. I thought if I had left, Dad would stop blaming you. The custody thing would go away. Everything would be better without me in the middle." Carrie held him tighter. "Nothing is better without you. Nothing. You are the only thing that matters. Do you understand me?" He nodded against her shoulder, his own tears soaking through her jacket. They stayed like that until the sun began to rise over the Hudson, painting the water gold and orange. A new day beginning despite everything that had happened in the darkness. And somewhere in Greenwich, Marcus Weston was about to learn that his desperate gambit had backfired in ways he could never have anticipated. News of Ethan's disappearance spread through Greenwich faster than the original scandal. The same parents who had whispered about Marcus's affair now whispered about his son running away in the middle of the night. The same community groups that had shared the GPS screenshot now shared concern for a 14-year-old boy who had been pushed to his breaking point. And when the details of Marcus's emergency custody motion leaked, as such details inevitably did in small towns with big secrets, the tide of public opinion shifted completely. He is trying to take her kid away after he cheated. Carrie overheard a mother say at the grocery store, after everything that poor woman has been through. Disgusting. Another replied, my husband plays golf with him sometimes. Not anymore. The shift was palpable. Invitations that had been quietly withdrawn after the scandal resurfaced. Neighbors who had avoided eye contact now stopped by with casseroles and offers of support. The community had chosen a side, and it was not Marcus's. Diana called with news that felt like vindication. The custody motion has been withdrawn. Marcus's attorney advised him that proceeding would be catastrophic given the circumstances surrounding Ethan's disappearance. Judge Blackwell also recused himself after several attorneys in the county raised concerns about his connection to the Weston family. Carrie exhaled a breath she had been holding for days. So it is over. The custody fight is over. The divorce proceedings will continue. But you have the high ground now. Public sympathy, documented evidence of infidelity and financial fraud, and a teenager who clearly wants to remain with his mother. It should have felt like victory. But Carrie found that revenge did not taste as sweet as she had imagined during the darkest nights. She thought about the Greenwich Country Club dinner that weekend. Marcus was scheduled to receive a community service award, something he had been nominated for months ago when his reputation was still intact. According to mutual friends, he intended to attend despite everything, hoping to rehabilitate his image. Carrie made a decision. The ballroom of the Greenwich Country Club sparkled with crystal chandeliers and silver place settings. Carrie arrived late, deliberately, choosing a table in the back corner where she could observe without being observed. Diana sat beside her, ready to intervene if the situation turned confrontational. Marcus entered 10 minutes after the program began, wearing his best suit and his most confident smile, but Carrie could see the cracks beneath the surface. His posture was too stiff. His handshakes were too eager. He was performing normalcy for an audience that had already stopped believing. The award ceremony droned through categories and recipients until Marcus's name was finally called. He walked to the podium with the stride of a man who had rehearsed this moment, who believed that if he acted successful, people would forget everything they had learned about him. Thank you, Biden, he began, his voice amplified through the sound system. I appreciate this recognition of my years of service to our community. People shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. I have always believed in integrity. Marcus continued, and the word hung in the air like a challenge. In being a good father, a good husband, a good neighbor. Movement at the back of the room caught Carrie's attention. Ethan had appeared in the doorway, his black eyes still visible, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Carrie's heart stopped. She had not planned this. She had not known he would come. Ethan walked forward slowly, his sneakers silent on the carpeted floor. People turned to watch him pass, recognizing the boy from the viral post, the boy who had exposed his father's lies. He reached the front of the room and stopped. Excuse me, what he said, and his voice was quiet, but somehow it carried. Can I say something? Marcus froze at the podium, his smile faltering. Ethan took the microphone before anyone could stop him. My dad says he is grateful for community support, Ethan said, facing the crowd. But he was not grateful for my mom's support for 15 years. He was not grateful when I tried to protect her. He was not grateful for anything except himself. He turned to look directly at his father. I do not hate you, Dad. I just do not believe anything you say anymore. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Ethan set down the microphone and walked toward the exit. Something remarkable happened. One of his baseball teammates stood up from a nearby table and followed him. Then another. Then a group of parents who had watched Ethan grow up, who had cheered at his games and sat with his mother at school events. One by one, people rose from their seats and walked out of the ballroom, leaving Marcus alone at the podium under the glittering chandeliers. Carrie was the last to stand. She met Marcus's eyes for a long moment. seeing not the man she had married, but the stranger he had become. Then she turned and followed her son out of the building. Outside, the autumn air was crisp and clean. Ethan stood near the valet stand, his shoulders shaking slightly. Carrie put her arm around him. That was incredibly brave. I did not plan it. I just could not sit at home knowing he was up there pretending to be something he is not. Diana approached with her phone in hand. Marcus's attorney just called mine. He wants to negotiate a settlement. He is offering significantly more than the initial proposal. Because he knows the fight is over, Carrie said. Because he knows he lost. Ethan looked up at his mother. So we won, Carrie considered the question. They had won the legal battle. They had won the public relations war. But winning, she was learning, came with its own costs. We survived, she said finally. And sometimes that is the most important victory of all. 6 months later, snow fell on Greenwich. Carrie stood at the window of her new home, a modest townhouse on the other side of town, watching the flakes drift down from a gray winter sky. The house was smaller than the Colonial on Maple Ridge Drive. The ceilings were lower, the rooms more cramped, the neighborhood less prestigious. But it was hers, every square foot of it, bought with her share of the divorce settlement fund, free of mortgages and family trusts and the weight of 15 years of lies. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago. The settlement was generous by any reasonable standard. Half of the retirement accounts, half of the investments, the hidden bank account had been divided as well. A small victory that felt larger because Marcus had tried so hard to conceal it. Carrie had enough money to live comfortably while she rebuilt the career she had abandoned a decade ago. Marcus had been less fortunate. The evidence Amber provided had led to an internal investigation at his company. The embezzled funds, the falsified expense reports, the bonus payments that had no legitimate business justification. He had been terminated for cause, his professional reputation destroyed. Last she heard, he was working at a smaller firm in New Jersey, a shadow of the ambitious executive who had once commanded corner offices and commanded attention. He had moved in with Patricia, which Carrie suspected was punishment enough for both of them. Amber had moved to Chicago. She had sent a single email a month after the divorce was finalized. 4 words, "You were right, thanks." Carrie did not reply. Some chapters deserved to remain closed. The doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. Ethan bounded down the stairs, still in his pajamas, and threw open the door to reveal Diana standing on the porch with a bottle of champagne and a grin. "Happy 6-month anniversary of freedom," Diana announced, stepping inside. "I brought bubbles." They settled in the living room, Carrie and Diana on the couch, Ethan on the floor with his new doe, a rescue mutt named Biscuit who had become his constant companion during the difficult months of transition. "So," Diana said, pouring champagne into mismatched glasses, "any New Year's resolutions?" Carrie considered the question. A year ago, she would have said something about being a better wife, a more supportive partner, a more attentive mother, goals defined by her relationship to other people. "I applied for a job," she said, marketing director at a tech startup in Stamford. "They called yesterday to schedule an interview." Diana raised her glass. "The return of Caroline Weston, a career woman." "Carrie," she corrected automatically. "Just Carrie now." Ethan looked up from scratching Biscuit's ears. "Mom, are we really going to be okay?" It was a question he had asked dozens of times over the past months. Each time, her answer had been a promise, a reassurance, a hope she was not always certain she believed. Today, she could answer differently. "We are already okay," she said. "We are different than we were before. We are smaller and quieter, and we have scars that will never completely fade. But we are okay." Ethan nodded slowly. He was 15 now, tall and gangly, caught in the awkward transition between childhood and adulthood. The black eye had healed months ago, but something in his expression would probably never be quite as innocent as it had been before that dawn when he waited in the dark with his iPad. "I heard from Dad yesterday," he said quietly. "He wants to see me this weekend." Carrie felt her chest tighten, an automatic reaction that she was learning to manage, but not to eliminate. The custody arrangement allowed Marcus supervised visitation twice a month. Ethan was not required to go, but he had chosen to maintain some connection to his father. "How do you feel about that?" she asked. "I do not know. He is trying harder than he used to, going to therapy, taking responsibility for some things. Ethan paused. I do not think I will ever trust him the way I used to, but maybe that is okay. Maybe relationships can be different without being completely broken. Carrie reached down and squeezed his shoulder. That is very wise for 15. I had to grow up fast. I am sorry for that. Do not be. Ethan looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much but still held warmth. Everything that happened got us here. And here is pretty good. Later that evening, after Diana had gone home and Ethan had retreated to his room with Biscuit, Carrie sat alone at her small kitchen table. The champagne bottle was empty. The house was quiet. Snow continued to fall outside the window, blanketing the world in white. She opened her laptop and looked at the email from the tech startup again. Interview scheduled for January 15th. Please confirm your availability. Her finger hovered over the reply button. A year ago, she would have asked Marcus for permission. She would have worried about how his schedule might be affected, whether he needed her home for some event or dinner or obligation that took precedence over her own ambitions. Now, the only person she needed to consult was herself. She typed a response. I confirm my availability. I look forward to meeting the team. Then she closed the laptop and looked out the window at the snow. Some stories end with happily ever after. This one ended with something harder and maybe more honest. Carrie Weston did not get her old life back. She got a different one, smaller, quieter, marked by the scars of battles she had never expected to fight. But it was hers, every piece of it, built from the ashes of a marriage that burned down because her son was brave enough to strike the match. My hero, he had written on that morning, that changed everything. But the truth, Carrie now understood, was that they had saved each other. She turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to rebuild. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was looking forward to finding out what came next. The snow continued to fall, covering the old world in white, making room for whatever the new one would bring.